is actually out today, although it is rather windy at certain times. Spring is coming, I guess you could say. That got me curious too, because in the US, with that FAA commenting in regards to things like the remote ID, it's almost over. So it kind of made me wonder, how many people actually commented? What types of comments are they actually putting out there and all that? So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to see. So I went to the site, and you can see here it's the Remote Identification of Unmanned Aircraft System. The proposed rule document was issued by the Federal Aviation Administration, and basically people are supposed to put in their comments, and it shows here how many comments there actually has been, I guess, since they launched it. And as of recording this, it says there's 31,468 comments received. That sounds kind of low, isn't it, overall, considering how many drone operators there are apparently? I looked at it straight from the government site. It says here, USA by the numbers. A few decades ago, drones were confined to science fiction or notions of the future. Today, unmanned aircraft systems or drones are rapidly becoming part of our everyday lives. They are quickly increasing in numbers and complexity. And it says here, here's a snapshot of the current state of drones in the United States. 1,552,633 drones registered. 436,836 drones registered commercially, so to speak, and for recreational, it says 1,112,088 recreational drones. And it says remote pilot certified 167,841. So that sounds really low in terms of the commenting, isn't it, in comparison to this? Kind of reminds me of those stakeholder sessions here in Canada with the drones and stuff. Before they introduced all the regulation stuff, I was basically just one of the few. It was empty overall when you think about it in comparison to what the true number is in terms of how many people actually fly this stuff. So the comments, what did people write? I was just quickly going through some of the more recent ones. This one here says, I'm a researcher and licensed SUAS pilot who is working on developing UAS applications in remote rangelands in the American West. This rule would be quite disruptive for drone research and work that is valuable to this community. I'm in favor of remote ID through radio broadcast technology instead of via internet. So this is one of those people who basically agree that there should be some kind of remote ID for drones, but not in that way. Some comments were rather blunt. This one says, go ahead and ban drones for hobby use. You're going to anyways. Nothing anyone says or does will change your mind. I stopped caring a long time ago due to the complete lack of confidence for anyone in Washington. You are all nothing but turds. Okay, tell me how you really feel. Then again, probably a lot of people do feel that way, yet this guy is the one who actually wrote that in the comments. Makes me wonder how many people have that feeling too, where regardless of how much they comment and stuff, they're gonna assume they're going to be ignored anyways. Then there was another one here that was kind of interesting. This one here says, I am an individual and hobbyist and have been building and flying FPV drones for 10 years. I heard that the FAA wants to regulate every hobbyist model, and I'm very disappointed with the decision because it comes out of sheer ignorance and lack of basic understanding what FAA is trying to regulate. RC hobby has been the fastest hobby in the world with lowest statistics of injuries or mishaps. This hobby is the last option for people to learn to work with their hands and learn about engineering and aeronautics, and FAA wants to take that away. This law about remote ID comes out of ignorance and not understanding of drone community and RC builders community. We do not buy commercially manufactured drones, but build our own drones. We race them, we crush them, then rebuild them again. Hobbyist drone is not an aircraft, but a collection of parts that work together. After crashes, those surviving parts find themselves on multiple other models. Average hobbyist does not own one model, but dozens and some hundreds, which are always modified and experimented with. The models always change, morph into something else as technology evolves. So it's kind of an interesting point because it seems like in many cases a lot of these regulations are based on more commercial applications. Kind of like that article I read basically of that press release where Google Wing says they fully support things like the remote ID because that's what they need to be able to make this stuff more widespread commercially. But in that case, they also said it doesn't make sense for, I guess, the average person. They need something different. And still continuing here, this guy says, this lawmaking out of ignorance will promote a culture of non-compliance and disregard for laws and regulations, since the law becomes meaningless due to being unreasonable and impossible to uphold. What's next? Is the FAA going to regulate footballs and freebies? I think he meant frisbees. Because those fly too and might not be mistakenly classified as an aircraft by the FAA. The last phrase is a joke, of course, but I would not be surprised if FAA starts thinking about it seriously. Although the joke with that nowadays is everything you see is a drone. It actually raises a lot of questions in terms of classifications, in terms of what people fly. Should everything be classified as if it's a huge manned aircraft? I've always said it shouldn't. There should be a clear distinction. Even here in Canada, where a lot of those people say, oh yeah, these things make perfect sense and all that. A lot of people I find that say that, they're just saying it from themselves, saying, oh, you only use, for example, the Mavic Pro or something like that, so it makes sense to you. Whereas they don't consider how the way this is written and everything like that, it actually affects everyone, like they say. People who make their own planes and stuff to fly for fun. This one says basically they're stepping out of their boundaries. Kind of reminds me of that story where, remember that lawyer in the US sued or whatever, successfully took the FAA to the court saying they have no right to demand for people to register their drones, which the person actually won, but I guess it was short-lived just because of the way the laws and stuff worked. This one here says, first of all, I would like to say that these proposed new rules are an overreach by the federal government. The FAA has no authority of airspace of the Class G airspace under 400 feet above ground level outside of the restricted radius for airports, particularly for hobby activities. It places an unnecessary financial burden on consumers and hobbyists. Are the men in black going to come out because someone is flying a $30 drone? Basically the point I brought up too, in terms of those tracking proposals and stuff. What's the point? Why do you need to track some kid flying like a little toy drone in a park or something like that? Second, it should be the responsibility of the FAA to fund any identification of the aircraft or use technology that can identify without a cost to the consumer. In fact, DJI creates one. But it's not my fault that you guys can't purchase or utilize existing technology. It should not be a burden on the consumer if used under 400 feet. I guess that's a controversial point too, with that drone to phone thing with the DJI. It's actually kind of interesting seeing the format of the people commenting. Some people even post like PDFs, like I saw here, like wow, really organized. I guess this person must be more like engineer-esque, and apparently it was. I've been building and flying radio-controlled airplanes for over 20 years. I agree on the need to keep manned aviation as well as the public safe from a growing threat and have read all the proposed change. I would like to make suggestions where assumptions are made and certain definitions and phrases are not clear. The term, quote, operated in the airspace of the United States is vague since there are different classes of airspace. Someone operating a crop duster, ultralight, or hang glider in Class G airspace is permitted to operate without a radio or transponder. Is the FAA not concerned about those threats to the MA or the public? Are they concerned about these operators and the danger that autonomous UAS, GPS, first-person vision, and flight stabilization pose to them? Where does this Class G airspace end? Can I legally fly a kite in front of my yard, or will that require remote ID? It seems like the proposed regulation changes are aimed at autonomous UAS deconfliction with other autonomous UAS and is inconsistent with other threats in the airspace of the United States. That's a very good point. I mean, people have mentioned that. Why is it that you're going to regulate something like this, yet there's far more dangerous stuff, I guess, out there as well? It says, my recommendation is the change to the regulations be applied with uniform consistency by the FAA and not single out one type of threat with no mention of other threats or specify which airspace in particular that regulation will be applied. Maybe regulate UAS operations somewhere above 500 to 1,000 feet AGL in Class G and within all other class of airspace. Maybe restrict UAS flights in known areas where hang gliders and small airports where ultralight crop dusters fly. These restrictions are already imposed on non-autonomous model aircraft community. This control can be coded into the GPS of the autonomous UAS and will restrict flights in these areas. I'm just saying, I get it from what he's saying, but I'm just imagining the whole people on the board, so to speak, that make the decisions. It's probably going way over their head, because I could be wrong, but maybe there's no actual drone operator on that board. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Reminds me, like here in Canada, it seems like when you talk to, like, let's say Transport Canada, from what I gather, it seems like you're talking to people who only have manned aviation in their head. They don't get it in terms of a drone, how people use it in everyday life and all that. Makes me curious, how do people in the US feel? Do you think by writing all your comments so far it's going to make a difference where they're going to say, nope, this is ridiculous, we're not going to go through with it? Or is it one of those money talks or whatever? Basically, whoever wants this thing in place, they're going to put it in place. right, see you guys later.